When I was 16, I had been dating a boy that lived down the street from me for about 3 years. We were inseparable because we lived so close to each other. The summer of 1999, he was about to go away to college, and I was about to be a senior in high school. I remember that summer just being so sick and not able to keep anything down and in the bed for what seemed like weeks. And my mom ended up taking me to the doctor. So I was at the doctor's office and my mom was out in the waiting room, and the doctor enters the room and I noticed that she's very pregnant. And then a few minutes later, she informed me that I was pregnant. And I just could not believe it. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I couldn't comprehend what she was saying. I was so naive. It had never crossed my mind that I was pregnant. So in a couple minutes after she told me I was pregnant, my mom came in and I had to tell her. So the three of us decided that abortion would be the best choice. We didn't really talk about, at least I don't remember us talking about, adoption or keeping the baby or what even abortion really involved. But we decided because of my age, abortion would be the best choice. So the doctor went out of the room and made the appointment for me. She came back in and I remember looking at her and saying, "You must hate me. You're so pregnant and now you're making an abortion appointment for me." And she just looked at me and said, "No, honey, if I was 16, I would do the same thing." And I think hearing that made me just assume this choice was the best one and not to question it anymore. And so I just went on with it, I did call my boyfriend and let him know that I was pregnant, and he just said, do what you feel is best. So I figured I should just go on with what, the doctor and my mom and I had chosen. And the next morning, my mom drove me to the abortion clinic, and there were lots of other women waiting there as well. I had a pregnancy test and filled out paperwork and all of those things, and then I went and sat in the room with all the other ladies that were about to get abortions. There were several different types of people and different ages and ethnicities, but I was definitely the youngest one. And I was still really sick, so I was carrying around a trash can and, was throwing up and I was crying. So I had like a box of tissues in one hand and a trash can in the other. So a lot of the ladies kind of were trying to help me just feel better, and they were telling me, nobody wants to be here, but it's better than the alternative. And I remember thinking, really? I'm not sure if it is, but I think knowing that the other ladies were getting it done too made me think, well, everybody does this, or, it's just another thing, no big deal. I kept looking all over the place for like some kind of signage that would tell me what was going to happen to me, because I didn't really know what an abortion involved. Eventually they called my name. I went into a room and it was really dark in there, and they had 2 floor lamps, which seemed odd because it just didn't seem like a doctor's office to me. I was just scared. I was so scared. The abortionist came in and it immediately felt like we had to hurry up, hurry up. Just in a rush. She did some things, rattled off some information to the nurse who wrote some things in my chart. And I asked if I could see the ultrasound, and she said, "That's not a good idea." So I didn't see it. They didn't give me any medication. They didn't give me anything to try to help me relax or feel better or help with the pain. I had a vacuum aspiration abortion, and it was extremely painful. I felt like it would never end. I remember the doctor yelling at me because I was in so much pain. I was kind of lifting my body up off the table, and she was saying, "You're just gonna make it take longer." So I did my best to sit still and just get it over with. And then when it was over, the doctor left, and the lady was there helping me sit up, and I remember her telling me, "You're gonna be dizzy," and I was. And she took me out into the waiting room. There was a bunch of black reclining chairs, and they were filled with the same women that I had seen previously. Nobody was talking anymore. Nobody was, trying to make somebody else feel better or making light of the situation. Everybody was just there in those moments. Some were throwing up, some were kind of passed out. but nobody was okay with what they had just done, I don't think. I remember laying in the reclining chair, kind of half asleep, and the nurse brought some cookies or crackers and juice, beside me a Sprite maybe. And then she also brought me a little brown bag, and when I looked inside, it was birth control pills. A few minutes later, I guess my allotted time was up for recovery. I remember kind of going out a different door than I had originally come in. I don't think they wanted anybody in the waiting room to see the women leaving, because honestly, they might not stay if they saw the women when they were leaving. But my mom was there waiting. She drove me home, and I guess I went in and went to sleep. And honestly, I went to church the next morning. I got up and got ready and went to church the next morning. I think I wanted so badly to pretend like it hadn't happened. So I thought if I just go on like it didn't happen, it didn't. And so I think I spent quite a while in that kind of state of denial, trying to just pretend like it didn't happen. And honestly, I think I was just numb to it and a little bit relieved maybe that it was over, but it wasn't over. As the years went by, I began to think about it more, kind of realize more what I had done, and did everything I could to avoid those thoughts and feelings. So I self-medicated, I drank alcohol, I did all sorts of drugs. I sought attention in all kinds of different ways. I let people treat me terribly because I just figured that's what I deserved anyway. And then, eventually I did end up marrying the boy that had gotten me pregnant when I was 16. And we, were married for 4 years and then decided to have a baby. And the first time we got pregnant, I remember it being an odd feeling to see a pregnancy test and be happy, because the only other time I had seen it, I had been so not happy about it. And that pregnancy ended in miscarriage. And for the longest time, I believed that was just my punishment. I deserve that, right? I took the life of my first child, so I deserve for God to take this child, right? I got pregnant soon after that, and that pregnancy was mostly really good. When I got a little further on in my pregnancy, I was having a lot of cramps, and my doctor checked me and said that my cervix was short. And thankfully, nothing really happened because of that. I could have, lost the baby, or I could have, gone into premature labor, and, all of these different scenarios could have happened, but they didn't, thank goodness. And my doctor said that the short cervix was due to the abortion. Whenever that baby was born, it took my breath away and changed my thoughts forever about abortion. I think for the most part, I had not really thought that much about my stance. Would I encourage someone to have one or not? But once I saw those little toes and those little fingers, I knew what I had done, and I knew it was wrong. So after my son was born, life goes on, and I was so happy to be a mom, but I was terrified that I was going to lose this baby, because it was what I deserved, I thought. And just lived in fear of that. And, I was hiding this huge skeleton in my closet. I was so ashamed for anybody to ever know about it. Just terrified to even talk about abortion. Would probably run if anybody had asked me my opinion on it. And I never had even spoken to my husband about it, who was the father of the baby I aborted. And I had also never talked about it with my mom, who took me. I did everything I could to hide it and avoid it. And through the next few years, that would continue, and I pretended like nothing was wrong, but I was dealing with a whole lot of emotional consequences, just being fearful, hating myself, allowing people to treat me poorly, regretting what I had done, thinking about how old this child would be, and what she or he would be like. And that's a very sad thing to do when you aren't healed. So eventually I read a blog that one of my friends had written, and she was saying that she had had an abortion at 17. And so I knew I could reach out to her because I knew she wouldn't judge me. So I did, and we ended up doing a Bible study together, and I think I found a lot of healing during that Bible study. I think I did believe that God had forgiven me, but I was still so covered in shame. And I remember telling her, I will never tell anybody else, just you, you know. And she said, you know, well, that's okay, and we'll see what happens. And so then I just, you know, went on with life again and didn't really talk about it anymore. And but still, even though I had accepted God's forgiveness to some degree, I was still struggling on the inside. And I just remember one day at church a few years ago, my pastor was saying, you know, we want to go further in our relationship with God. And he's saying, come on, you know, we want to go further, but we are the ones holding ourselves back. We're saying, oh, God, you can have all of these things, but you can't have this thing. I'm not going to be willing to give this thing to you. And so I knew that God was, you know, talking to me. And I actually went up after the service and talked to my pastor about it. And he said, you know, sometimes the best thing to do is to be transparent. And so I went home and I wrote a blog, which I had been writing a blog for several years. So I had a pretty big following. And I knew that it would get read if I shared it that way. And so I did it that day because I was afraid I wouldn't do it if I didn't do it that day. And I shared my story on my blog. And I really believed that people would hate me for it, that they would just despise me and call me names, or, you know, I don't know what I was really expecting to happen. But what happened was just the opposite of everything I imagined. People were just so gracious towards me and thanked me for sharing my story. And, you know, I had several women reach out and say they had also had an abortion. And so I knew then that I wanted to do more with my story and share it more, but I didn't know how. And soon after that, I found out I was pregnant with my fourth child, a little girl. I gave birth to her. And then a few years after she was born, I was given the opportunity to share my story through a video at my church. And I was able to talk about my story and the truth about abortion, but also how it felt to walk in healing and freedom. Soon after that, I had ladies reaching out to me saying that they had also had abortions and just needed help finding healing. People that had been 40 years since their abortion were reaching out to me. You know, all types of people that you would have never expected to have had abortion. So I started having a post-abortive Bible study at my church. But I quickly found out that women who have had an abortion don't want to come to a church for a study because then their people are going to know that's why they're there. So I decided I needed to find somewhere else to do these post-abortive Bible studies. In the meantime, God was really working on my heart. I began doing sidewalk advocacy, loving on women who were entering in the Planned Parenthood, just hoping to offer them some advice and maybe some hope and a different choice. And so I was leading these Bible studies, and I was also doing the sidewalk advocacy, and God just birthed a ministry through that called Not Forgotten Ministries. We are in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I was able to get a place for our Bible studies that's only a block and a half away from the Planned Parenthood. And since then, we have been doing sidewalk advocacy and lots of different types of post-abortive Bible studies and weekend healing retreats and, you know, different programs to help women who have experienced abortion realize that they're not alone, that there is hope and healing available for them. God is never done. I'm always finding new levels of freedom and healing. He continues to bless my heart as I minister to other women who have been in this situation. This healing journey has been incredible, and I was so afraid of it. If I could go back and tell myself one thing, I would say, don't be afraid of the journey, because it's going to be so much better than you could ever imagine, and God is going to use your pain for something purposeful and something really good. When I'm given the opportunity to speak with someone who's considering abortion, I always tell them, you'll carry a baby for 9 months, but you'll carry an abortion for the rest of your life. And I just encourage them to think about this long term and how they might feel about it later when they have other children who, they've taken the older sibling from, I encourage them to truly consider all the options, to slow down and to not rush into a decision, because it's one that you can't take back.